Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you're able to come to the Eating Smart class again today. We are excited to get started. If you weren't able to come last week, we're going to go over some brief introductions again. And so Mariah and I wanted to be able to reintroduce who we are in case, like I said, in case you missed last week. So my name's Catherine. I'm the registered dietitian for dining services. And there are several dietitians on campus. And I'm one of the ones that I work for dining services and I'm in charge of menus. And Mariah works with me and she is in charge of nutrition analysis. So I'm going to let her talk really quick and tell you a little bit about what she does.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. So Catherine mentioned I am Mariah McDaniel. I'm the dietetic technician and I'm assistant to Catherine. She's our registered dietitian. And my main job, my main purpose at the University of Georgia Dining Services is making sure that all the nutrition information for everything served in the dining halls is as up to date as we can possibly get it. So whenever a product changes or something like that, we update the nutrition information that's posted online so that you can see the ingredients and the allergens and all of that sort of thing, all of those sort of things. I also do nutrition education like this. I support our peer nutrition educators on campus and Catherine leads that group. But yeah, that's what I do here.
Thanks, Mariah. And so just a review of some of our nutrition education opportunities you have for being on the meal plan is you can have counseling with me. This class, of course, Eating Smart class, we have education stations in all the dining halls with iPads where you can access information on the nutrition in all of our menu items, the allergy information, and it calculates nutrition information for your total plate. We talked about that last week and I was able to show you how that works. So if you have any questions, you can always just email me about it. And then now part of the nutrition education that we do on campus is that I will work with nutrition students and nutrition interns. And so we are lucky to have Betsy with us this semester. She is a dietetic intern and she's also a PhD student in the nutrition department. And part of how that process works is that she does nutrition education and I oversee it and then I give her feedback. And so we're going to have her teach this class today as part of her education and training so that she will one day very soon be a registered dietitian like myself. So I'm going to turn it over to Betsy so that she can introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Catherine. So like Catherine said, I'm a dietetic intern. I'm on my road to being a dietitian. My research at Food and Nutrition is focused on kind of what we're talking about today. So my specific subject area is in vascular function. But more broadly, I'm studying cardiovascular disease. And so I'm really excited to share the presentation with you guys today because this is my topic I count on. So if I ever get too far in the details, just let me know. But it is a topic that I'm really excited about, especially in terms of how diet interacts with cardiovascular disease risk. So otherwise, yeah, I'm excited. I have had such a great time learning from Catherine this last year. And in the summer, I'm off to rotations at the hospital, which will be equally as interesting. So I'm excited for my presentation and I hope you guys are too. Should I share my screen? All right. Okay, so I have really bad vision, so if I'm getting really close to the camera, just ignore me. I'm just trying to read my slides. But like I said, today we're going to be talking about getting heart healthy and reducing our cardiovascular disease risk through some easy lifestyle changes. So the outline of today's talk is to first introduce cardiovascular disease. What is it? Talk about the risk factors, specifically talk about blood pressure, cholesterol, and then look at different ways we can prevent or reduce our cardiovascular disease risk. So what is it? Cardiovascular disease is an umbrella term for a number of different conditions. So what conditions do you guys think fall under this umbrella term cardiovascular disease? Stroke. Thanks, Catherine. Okay, so I will give you some hints. So under cardiovascular disease, we've got a couple different conditions: heart failure, heart disease, heart attack, and stroke. These are the big guys that we're always talking about and trying to avoid because they can be deadly. Cardiovascular disease is preceded by a number of different things that contribute to atherosclerosis. So we'll talk about this later, but this is basically the hardening of your vessels because of plaque buildup. And so today I wanted to talk about some of the risk factors that contribute to atherosclerosis, and then how that in turn reduces your risk of cardiovascular disease. So I grabbed this infographic because I like it. It really plainly illustrates how these different risk factors can lead to an increase in cardiovascular disease risk. And you might notice from this that most of them are lifestyle related and modifiable. So like cigarette smoking, blood pressure, physical activity, and obesity, these are all things that aren't necessarily set in stone. So first we'll talk about obesity. I pulled the stat for you guys. 18.9% of college-age adults have obesity. This is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Increased adiposity is related to a number of different things. So obesity is the result of genetics, environment, and lifestyle. And so tweaking these small behaviors, including exercise and diet that may be related to obesity, can reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease and improve other risk factors associated with cardiovascular disease risk. And so inadvertently, when you work on your cardiovascular disease risk factors, you may also reduce the amount of adiposity that would put you at risk for cardiovascular disease. Next, I want to talk about blood pressure and cholesterol. So 50.6% of 20-plus-year-olds have elevated cholesterol, and 59% have elevated blood pressure. And I think these are really important statistics because I don't know how many times you're going to the doctor and getting your blood lipids checked, or paying attention to your blood pressure. So it's important to ask these questions when you go to the doctor. Cholesterol. I mentioned this before about atherosclerosis, but cholesterol is the guy that contributes to the buildup of plaque in your arteries. And so when you have high cholesterol or cholesterol over 200 milligrams per deciliter, that's when you're going to start seeing the negative effects associated with it. So cholesterol is created by your body when you consume foods. And there's two different types of cholesterol. There's good cholesterol or high density lipoprotein, HDL. And then we have our bad cholesterol or low density lipoprotein, LDL. This is what happens in your body when you eat some food. So first, when you eat processed high saturated fat foods or takeaway foods, then your body metabolizes those foods. And so in this picture, I have these guys are fun little chylomicrons that are bringing the fat from your meal to your liver. And then essentially your liver processes it and then carries it to tissues where those fats are deposited into your vessel walls, creating plaque. And then that plaque recruits more plaque. And then over time, the plaque builds up and hardens, which increases your risk of cardiovascular events. And especially because sometimes other factors that happen could contribute to that plaque becoming unstable and possibly rupturing. And so plaque buildup we want to avoid. Conversely, healthy diets that are rich in lean protein, fruits, vegetables, and low-fat foods, when we eat those foods, we still get the metabolism of those foods and they still are floating in our blood, but we don't get plaque buildup just because the types of fats usually in healthy diets aren't the saturated or trans fat kinds that can lead to plaque buildup in our arteries. Yay, good. Okay, before I move on, does anyone have any questions about cholesterol or cardiovascular disease? Okay, so next I wanted to talk about blood pressure. This is another one that can sneak up on us, especially if we're not going to the doctor a lot. But they have those fun ones at the pharmacies, I think, still. So if you ever get a chance, or if you're ever in Dawson Hall, I'd be happy to take your blood pressure. But blood pressure is the pressure against or in your arteries, and it changes throughout the day. And so sometimes you'll have high blood pressure and sometimes you'll have low blood pressure. There's two different types of blood pressure. The top number, which you may have seen, is called systolic blood pressure. And this is the pressure when your heart beats. And then the bottom number is called diastolic pressure. And this is the pressure when is the other beat. So some standards with blood pressure. Normal blood pressure is at 120 systolic over 80 diastolic millimolars of mercury. You'd be considered at risk for hypertension or high blood pressure if you're between 120 to 139 systolic over 80 to 89 diastolic, and then you'd be considered to have high blood pressure if you have greater than 140 systolic over 90 diastolic. So we've talked about obesity, we've talked about cholesterol, and we've talked about blood pressure. And now I'd like to pivot and talk about what we can do to control these risk factors and reduce our risk of cardiovascular disease. First, we're going to talk about eating well. What types of foods could increase one's risk of cardiovascular disease? You guys, there's no poll, but if you want to brainstorm in the chat. What foods you think would be healthy and not, wait, did I say? Oh, increase a risk. Okay, you guys are on the right track. My bad. Definitely. Okay, so saturated fats, yep, those are those atherogenic pro-plaque foods. And then there's saturated fat in butter and fried foods. So y'all are on the right track. So those are gonna increase your cardiovascular disease risk. Let's talk about foods that will maybe decrease your cardiovascular disease risk with nutrition for heart health. And so the aim of this would be to reduce cardiovascular disease risk through the incorporation of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, low-fat dairy, and limiting those things that are high in saturated fat, red meats, sodium, added sugars, and fat. So there's this thing called the DASH diet. DASH stands for Dietary Approach to Stop Hypertension. And if you can remember, hypertension or high blood pressure is one major risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So of course, following this eating style may help reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease. What the DASH diet is a restricted sodium diet that emphasizes whole grains, lean proteins, low-fat dairy, fruits, vegetables, healthy oils like our olive oils and our other vegetable oils, nuts and seeds, and limiting our sugar intake to 5 items or less. So let's break this down. What are healthy fats? Healthy fats are monounsaturated fat or polyunsaturated fat, or MUFAs and PUFAs. So these are the good guys, whereas saturated fat, like you guys mentioned, were not so good for cardiovascular disease risk. And so where these fats are found, you can find them in proteins like tuna, herring, lake trout, mackerel, sardines, and salmon. You can also find them in nuts and seeds, including almonds, hazelnuts, pistachios, sunflower. Oh, I can't believe I left out my favorite, pecans. You can find them in avocados, and then you can also find them, like I said, in oils. So these will just be any of those vegetable oils, some nut oils, and olive oil. And so how these fats, what they do, how they interact with cardiovascular disease risk is that they lower our bad cholesterol and triglyceride levels. And then they also provide essential fats that our bodies need and can't produce themselves. So these healthy fats act to lower our bad cholesterol and decrease our risk of cardiovascular disease. The DASH diet also suggests reducing your added sugar intake. And so added sugar, we kind of talked about this last week, but added sugar is sugar that is added to foods. So it's in soft drinks, it's in candy and cakes and pies, it's in fruit juices, it's in dairy desserts and some milk products, and it's in sauces and breads. And the reason that we want to limit these added sugar intake is because a greater consumption of added sugar is related to increased inflammation, which down the line is related to increased cardiovascular disease risk. And so less sugar intake, it would lead to less inflammation, but also a lot of these sugary products have a lot of added energy, and they're really energy dense. And so reducing your sugar intake also might help keep your calorie intake in check. But like I said on the slide, sugar is not inherently bad, but restricting sugar will help you reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease. So some tips for doing this: know where the sugar is added. And so when you order your coffee without sugar, you can add some on your own if needed. Likely when you do this by yourself, you'll never add the same amount of sugar that would have been added if you didn't do it yourself. So this is the best way to kind of control how much sugar is going into your food. And then when you're purchasing foods, focus on products with no or low added sugars. And pay attention to the food labels on sauces, breads, peanut butter, and yogurt. Those are common culprits that have surprisingly high amounts of added sugar. The next tip is to reduce sugar-sweetened beverage intake. So this is pretty straightforward tip, but if you can, swap out your soda for water, even soda water. You could try some infused water or some unsweetened teas to really mix it up. Also, sugar-free soda if you must, but keep it limited. The next tip is to eat fruit in any form. So if you have a sweet tooth like me, you can still get that sweet fix if you're eating fruit. So when you're looking at fruit, you can choose fresh, frozen, canned, or dried. They all have they all are healthy for you. And if you do choose canned fruit, make sure that it's in 100% fruit juice instead of syrup, because those syrups is that added sugar that we're trying to avoid. And then the last part, kind of like we mentioned before, is to read the labels and adjust. Okay, so the next thing that the DASH diet really focuses on, and I actually really recently nerded out on, was sodium. So the DASH diet really wants to keep sodium intake in check. So sodium makes up about only a 40% of salt. So salt and sodium are not necessarily the same thing, but in 1 teaspoon of salt, there is 2,300 milligrams of sodium, which is the daily recommendation. So if you can imagine what a teaspoon of salt looks like, that's not a lot. And it can be sneaky because sodium also lives in foods that we might not necessarily think it is. So kind of, I mentioned here, celery and beets and milk have sodium in them, but other food products that we probably think or know to have sodium would be also major culprits of sodium in the diet: pizza, burritos, tacos, bread, sandwiches, canned soups, lunch meats. All of these things are high in sodium and are a focus of the DASH diet to restrict and reduce. What is the reason for this? Excess sodium. It's been pretty well established that when you intake sodium in high amounts, it leads to an increase in blood pressure, which increases your risk of cardiovascular disease. When these vessels are overworked, they can cause stress on the heart muscle, and that's what we want to avoid, because when your heart muscle is hurting, that's when you get those cardiovascular events that can be lethal. Another reason that sodium is good to focus on when you're thinking about diet is that an increased sodium diet is associated with increased water weight and bloating. But there's other benefits to cutting sodium too that I didn't mention, but it's just something that maybe it would be good. So I have some tips for you. Instead of using salt when you're cooking at home, definitely try to utilize other spices. And so I had some suggestions for, instead of salt, using cumin or chili powder. And then my favorite spice, if you're going for an Italian dish, is thyme. My mom always said you can never have too much thyme, and she is right. So instead of salting your foods, I would definitely try to explore your spice cabinet and try some fun new things. There also are low sodium or lightly salted versions of your favorite snacks that you could look into. And so I think maybe if you've gone down the chip aisle, you'll see a low sodium or lightly salted version. So you can itch that scratch without taking in too much salt. And then the last tip for reducing sodium is to reduce or minimize the frequency that you consume fried foods. And so fried foods is a major source of sodium in the Western diet. And so keeping this to more of a fun every once in a while or a special treat for yourself can help you cut down on your sodium intake long term. Another focus of the DASH diet is to get more fiber. And so you can get fiber from many different things. But if you think breads, beans, and nuts and seeds, that's where you're going to find luck in getting fiber. Why is fiber healthy? It's healthy because fiber plays a huge role in appetite control and weight management. Fiber slows down how fast your body processes food, which gives you a longer feeling of fullness, which subsequently may lead to successful weight management, and can improve your gut microbiota. I'm not an expert in gut microbiota, but if you do have questions later, we can talk about the gut and fiber, but I may not have answers for you. But that's some of the cool things that fiber can do and why it's emphasized in the DASH diet. When you're looking for whole grains, like I said, I've listed a few whole grains that you can look for. So I think I went into this presentation and this slide specifically with my gluten-free eyes, since I'm a gluten-free person. But some fun different whole grains include barley, burglar, millet, and oats, and then of course wheat. And so when you're looking at the grocery store and you see, or in a dining hall and you see these ingredients, know that they're whole grains and know that you're making healthy choices. So I guess that was a good segue. So how do we do this in the dining hall? What does it look like, and how can you navigate healthy eating in the dining hall? So I've got some 3 different ways to eat healthy and eat smart when you're in a dining hall. So the first is to look for the heart symbols. Next is to build your plate, which we went over last week. And the last thing is to ask about it. This is why myself, Mariah, and specifically Catherine are here. We're here to help you. So always ask. We've got these nutrition education stations in the dining hall. So if the build your plate, you need a bigger screen like I do, since I'm needing these glasses to see. They've got these nice iPads in the dining hall that will allow you to access build your plate. So you can look at nutrition information. You can also use it on your phone, and we went over this last week, but when you go on your phone, you can just visit the dining.uj.edu website, then you select build your plate, and then you choose what day you're interested in looking at, and then you select the food items that you're interested in reading about. So just to recap, because that was pretty quick, when you're in the dining commons, make sure you're checking for heart symbols on the menu items, which indicate that they're heart healthy. Make sure you're emphasizing fruit and vegetables and whole grains on your plates, and make sure that you're limiting added sugars and sodium when you're walking through and making your food choices. So I've pulled up a couple examples for us to walk through of foods that you can actually find in the dining hall. So first, these plates get an A+ from me because they're emphasizing vegetables. And so on the left, we've got some carrots and cucumbers, and on the right, we've got a nice, lovely salad. Another reason these plates get A+ is because they have protein in them. So it looks like here we have a burger, delicious protein, maybe a lean ground meat burger. And then we've got some peas, we've got some brown rice, and it looks like maybe a peanut sauce drizzle for our protein in this one on the left. And then the last reason these guys get A+ for heart healthy is that they incorporate whole grains. So here we've got our rice, and over here we've got our whole grain bun. I've got some more examples. So for this one, let's see, I like these dishes because they incorporate our vegetables. We've got a salad and some asparagus. And they emphasize protein and whole grains. So this guy's missing a whole grain, but throw a whole grain bun on there and you're set. And then this one, this could be a whole grain pasta. And that's yummy and heart healthy. Okay, so the dining hall's got you covered. You've got the red hearts, you've got build your plate, but what do you do when you're not in the dining hall? So I've got some ideas for snacks. Number one, popcorn. Popcorn is a great source of fiber, and you can easily season this with your favorite toppings. But remember not to go heavy on the salt because we're trying to reduce our salt intake. But likely when you air pop popcorn, you'll never add as much sodium to that popcorn as you would when you buy a packaged pack of popcorn. My favorite popcorn toppings are paprika, nutritional yeast. It gives the kernels a special taste without the sodium kick. Another healthy snack that you can look for are just, oh, this is a typo, but nuts and seeds. So nuts are just like one of those great handheld snacks that you can just pop in and you're good to go. They're high in fiber and healthy fats and protein, so they'll keep you satiated for longer. And then of course, last for snack ideas, fruits and veggies, handheld fruits specifically, vegetables. So your clementines, your carrots, your cucumbers, apples, grapes, tomatoes, broccoli. These things are easy to put together, don't require too much pre-prep, and will keep you full during the day. For dinner, I have a QR code for you guys if you're interested in scanning the QR code to get more heart-healthy dinner recipe ideas, but I pulled 3 from the American Heart Association that I thought looked good. Whole grain pasta, of course, so easy. This whole grain pasta recipe packs a whopping amount of 24 grams of protein, so you'll stay nice and full. It has, it's high in fiber and is pretty low cost at $2 per serving. The next, I've got a stir fry with brown rice. Everybody loves a good stir fry. And then quinoa and burrito bowls. Quinoa is one of those fun rice-like grains, legumes, that is rich in protein. And so this is like just like a fun way to be adventurous, but also indulge your Taco Tuesday needs. Okay, so back to this screen. So what can you do to decrease cardiovascular disease risk? Another thing that you could do is incorporate exercise. When you exercise, this helps lower your blood pressure and therefore lower your cardiovascular disease risk. So what are the recommendations? The American Heart Association recommends that you get 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity per week. This would be intense walking or jogging, swimming, playing tennis, biking, any of those things that get your heart rate up, but aren't necessarily, you know, like CrossFit or squat jumps or sprint running. They also, as an alternative, recommend 75 minutes of vigorous activity. So that's kind of what those things are. They also recommend moderate high intensity strength training twice a week. So this is in addition to the recommendation of the 150 minutes. They also recommend to limit your sitting time and to gradually increase the intensity and amount of exercise you do over time. So of course, if you aren't very active now, they don't recommend that you start with a high volume exercise program right off the bat. You need to ease into it to prevent injury. So when you're implementing an exercise routine, you need to start small. You need to make SMART goals. I'm sure you guys have heard of that, but specific, measurable, attainable. Oh my gosh, I should have reviewed this. Oh my gosh, I don't remember the R and the T, but time is the T. But these goals are just really specific and things that you can accomplish and make new goals on top of. It's important too when you're implementing exercise to have fun, because the worst thing and the thing that would lead to you stopping your exercise program is if you don't like it. And so make sure when you're trying out a new exercise that you are choosing something that you like to do. And this liking of exercise can be amplified when you share it with friends. So I wanted to give you guys a chance to maybe share your exercise activities or what you plan on trying possibly in the future. Nice. Walking is a really great exercise, especially on these nice days. Yoga, I need to do yoga. Ramsey's pool is super great. These are all good ideas, guys. Definitely, if you haven't been exercising regularly, walking is a great place to start. And Athens is such a great place to walk around. And so I always try to make the point of taking just 10 to 20 minute walk breaks through the day, just to make sure I'm getting those steps in. Okay, so the last tip to reducing cardiovascular disease is to get some sleep. Sleep quality is really important to cardiovascular disease risk, and we'll talk about why. So, like I said, sleep can influence your cardiovascular disease risk by having good quality sleep helps your vessels, helps your heart, and lowers that risk. And it all has to do with a thing called melatonin. So melatonin is the sleep hormone. I'm sure you all have heard about it. And melatonin is produced in the absence of light by the pineal gland. And when you are in the absence of light, the pineal gland releases melatonin, which leads to us feeling drowsy and ready for bed or falling asleep. How is this connected to cardiovascular disease? Melatonin helps with glucose and lipid metabolism and also is a powerful antioxidant, which functions to reduce inflammation and oxidative stress. And melatonin levels are decreased in people with heart disease. And so this is where we think that there might be a link between melatonin levels and cardiovascular disease, because when comparing healthy normal controls to a group of people with coronary heart disease, which is one of those diseases that fall under cardiovascular disease, the levels of melatonin in the people with cardiovascular disease were 5 times lower. So there might be a link. So how can we make sure that we're getting good sleep so that our cardiovascular disease risk is limited? Things that might bother sleep include alcohol. And so if we limit our alcohol consumption, we may sleep better. If another thing about sleep is making it a habit. And so I know with studying, it can be very variable when we go to bed, but trying to make a habit of it, trying to go to bed around the same time every night is a good way to establish when sleep time is. Another tip is to set the stage. And so this means to set up your sleep space in a way that supports good sleep. So if your room is really cold or too hot, that could not be the best way to help you fall asleep. If your bed is a place that you have a lot of your electronics on, we all know that electronics can influence melatonin release, and so that might not help good sleep. Setting the stage really is part of the habit, but also important to sleep. Like I mentioned, putting away distractions is important for good sleep. And so making sure that we put our phones, the computer, even sometimes for me, a really interesting book, I can't read right before bed because it is so interesting and I can't put it down. So I have to put my most boring books on my nightstand so that I can go to sleep. So planning, setting the stage, and keeping these distractions away will help you sleep better. Another thing is to try to avoid snacking or late meals later in the evening. Just because your body is going to be in the digestion mode and not the sleep mode, it's better to avoid snacking late at night. And then exercise also helps with sleep quality. So if you exercise during the day, you might have better sleep at night. So I kind of mentioned this, but what do you guys think impacts melatonin levels? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sunlight. No, just I think just together.
Sunlight, definitely, that's right. All these factors that tell our body that we're not sleeping can impact melatonin levels. So all good thoughts. But having good amounts of melatonin in our body helps reduce inflammation and reduce that cardiovascular disease risk. So to conclude my presentation, I wanted to remind you of the 3 things that we can do about our cardiovascular disease risks and help prevent cardiovascular disease later on. So by making these smart shifts, we can support our body's healthy functioning, but also support our heart health. So like we talked about today, it's really important to eat well, exercise, and sleep in order to have a good cardiovascular healthy system. All right, that's it. I can take some questions.
Hey, Betsy, I saw some come through if you want me to read those to you.
Yeah,
So
that would be, should I stop sharing? Sorry.
No, it's fine. Whatever you think.
Okay.
So we had questions about types of salt. So whether sea salt or pink Himalayan salt are any different than just regular table salt.
So my understanding is that those salts are trendy, but actually may pack more sodium because the granules are larger oftentimes with those types of salts. And so kind of like how carbohydrates, glucose is glucose, I think sodium is sodium inside of the body. So no, I don't think there is a difference.
Yeah, I just want to add that to that you're right, that it's the same in our bodies. However, sometimes recipes will call for those different salts because they have such a strong flavor. They're bigger crystals. And so if you're having like a piece of like I'm thinking of dark chocolate. Sometimes they'll put sea salt on top of it. It really hits your tongue all at once. So sometimes people would recommend using sea salt because you actually can use less in the recipe that way. But for the most part, it's going to be the same impact and the same amount that's going to be called for in the recipe. And there are different types of minerals and salts depending on where they're mined in the world, but that amount of minerals is really negligible. So it's not like it's going to give you a good source of any particular mineral.
Cool. I think besides recommendations actually, we did have one person say, how do I walk more instead of sitting during the day when I have so much schoolwork?
That's real. That's a real question. But honestly, I think they've shown, I'm not a kinesiology person, but I think I've read a paper about even like walking up the stairs a few times, like quick 10-minute at the most breaks, will improve your cardiovascular health. And I've even read a study too that if you are seated all day and you put a heated blanket over your legs, that helps with your circulation, which blunts the negative effects of sitting all day. So if you must sit all day, the study used a hot bath for your feet, but most of us don't have hot baths to keep our feet in all day. But if you are in a chair all day and you absolutely can't, definitely try maybe making sure that your lower extremities are warm. But I think we can all fit short bursts of exercise into our day.
Yeah, that's a great point. And someone just wrote in that they want a standing desk. I was going to encourage you to create your own in your room. You can take boxes or any contraption like board games. I've done that at home. I could stack board games and just put my laptop on top. You could do that. And then along with what Betsy was saying, those short breaks are really effective. You should get up, they say, every 50 minutes. And even if it's just a quick walk up and downstairs or run to the bathroom, or you can do things like calf raises. That's where you're standing and you just you lift on your toes and you squeeze your core and you squeeze your legs and your glutes. And then you just kind of raise. A kinesiology professor I used to work with said that just that movement alone livens up all the cardiovascular, like in your feet, all the arteries in your toes. It just really helps with circulation. And what he does is he actually works with people who are quadriplegic, and he's trying to have them in a wheelchair, squeezing their legs in a way that replicates just standing on our toes. And so if you are able to use your legs, like don't take that for granted and just stand up and lift yourself, and you are replicating what he's trying to do for people who can't walk. So it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I also saw recommendations of reading textbooks while you're walking. That's actually something I personally do. I'm currently in a health policy class, and so anytime I have to read a chapter in my book, I try to take it outside if I can and just walk around my neighborhood. But other people recommended walking in Ramsey. That's a really great option. Or if you have access to a treadmill or an elliptical, doing schoolwork while you're exercising is a really cool option because it gets your brain juices flowing, gets that blood flowing, but also it's multitasking. You're achieving two things at one time.
Yeah, every time I had long chunks of things to memorize, I would take my study night notes with me and take it to the gym, and I would either look at it and then jog and try to memorize or walk, or I would put it on a bicycle and cycle and look down and memorize and then look away, or on the elliptical, the same thing, because I'm not going to lie, I hated memorizing biochem. And so that was one way to make it less painful. And I found that I could memorize things like 3 times faster if I was moving or pacing or doing something like that.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. If anybody else wants to reach out, send a message to the chat. We have a little bit more time. I also wanted to share that sleep, I didn't realize how important sleep was until I actually started getting it. I'm a master's student, and I think I started sleeping for real in master's school, which is not a good thing. I shouldn't have waited until now. But you don't realize how great sleep is until you don't have it. And so if you can, push those fears in your brain, like, oh, if I don't stay up until midnight and study all night, I'm gonna fail. Push those fears away, get yourself some sleep. I promise you will still do just as well, and probably even better if you get a full night's sleep.
Yeah, I spoke to some sleep experts before, and they said the number one thing they do when they work with a client is they have you write down your schedule, and you block out every hour of your day, and then you fill it in with what you do. And then a lot of times people realize how many hours they do have that are free that they could be using more effectively for maybe studying in between classes, or to be doing something earlier in the day instead of waiting till nighttime when it's more, convenient, or when they're thinking about it. So kind of looking and reshaping how you view your day. Okay, so Betsy, we had another question come in. Is there a way to turn LDL into HDL?
That's a good question. So they operate in opposition to one another. And so your LDLs, they take your lipids that from your meal that were processed by your liver and deliver them to your tissues. And then HDL picks up those lipids from your tissues and brings it back to the liver. And so that's why we like HDL, because it takes lipids from the tissues and gets rid of them. So in a way, HDL may pick up the lipids that were dropped off by LDL, but they don't convert into each other. But if you're consuming a diet that is on the healthy spectrum, you might see an increase in HDL and a decrease in LDL.
And another great way to increase your HDLs is movement. And so it could be exercise, but it could also be, hey, maybe you're studying all day, so to get up and do all those movement breaks. And then also things like wall squats. I know it sounds really, really simple, but doing something where you're really intensely using a big muscle group is able to move the triglycerides out of your bloodstream. And so it really helps with, if you can't really go for a long walk, or you can't really exercise right now, doing those little breaks all day. And when you can, maybe do a wall sit, or like a plank, or some calf raises. And that little burst of intensity really helps with HDL and triglycerides.
And then I'll just add too, like, if you're consuming a diet that's high in antioxidants, or you're getting adequate sleep because melatonin's an antioxidant, these things will help reduce the atherosclerosis that might result from a high saturated fatty acid diet, where you do get the elevated LDL. Because the worst thing that could happen is your LDL modifies into oxidated LDL, and then that wreaks havoc, and then there's no antioxidants in your cells to reduce the inflammation that happens with saturated fatty acids.
Yeah, so like, in other words, LDL is like wreaking havoc inside of you, but if you eat an orange, that vitamin C helps cancel that out. So another reason to get your fruits and vegetables. Okay, so we had a really great discussion today. Thanks for all the questions. We are going to meet again next week. If you have any topics you want us to talk about, either send me or Mariah an email, and we'll make sure to include those things. Mariah is going to be talking more about how to eat healthy in the dining halls. And so we're going to be also talking about antioxidants, as well as some mindful eating in the weeks to come. So good things to look forward to. We hope you have a really great night. And once again, if you need us, have questions, let us know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.